Welcome everyone. It's great to see the many faces I see and the names I see, and that so many have signed up for this AIJA Women Network webinar. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Maria Jennerholm. I'm one of the co-chairs of the network together with Joanna Chu and Fernanda Pacheco. The AIJA Women Network was founded by two of our members. I see Paula Fudakowska here online, and also Jennifer Maxwell. They saw a need to find a forum within the organization to discuss structural issues that faces women during our legal career, and to leverage the strength and capabilities of AIJA's members to promote and progress the advancement of women's career in the legal sector. The first session was held at the Virtual Congress in 2020, and since then we have arranged a number of sessions, both live and digital, on topics such as challenging stereotypes and fighting bias, how to be an ally, addressing reproductive health challenges in the workplace, and most recently at the Congress in Rio, we held a seminar on women in tech. You can find several of these seminars available at AIJA's webpage under the AIJA Women Network. And for your information, also today's seminar will be recorded and found on the site. And though we are named AIJA Women Network, I want to stress that our network is an inclusive one, and we are very happy to have many of our male colleagues also participating actively in the work of the network and planning of sessions. And I would like to also take the opportunity to say that we encourage all members to get engaged in the network, and we are always looking for new ideas of topics. So please reach out if you have any ideas and would like to get involved in organizing sessions, live or digital. Before I introduce the topic of today and our speakers, we have Eduardo, our president, with us, and I know he wished to say a few words. So I'm going to hand over to Eduardo.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good morning for those who are in this side of the world. Good afternoon for those who are on the other side of the Atlantic. It's really a pleasure to be here. Oreste, if you can move to the next slide, please. So I just thought, a couple of minutes about one of my favorite topics in life, which is AIJA, and why AIJA. So AIJA, for those of you who are new to the association through this event, it's the only global legal association dedicated exclusively to lawyers under 45 from across the world. The way we do it is through the organizations of events at a large scale. That goes from congresses, like you just heard from Maria in Rio, to have your conferences, which are also very big meetings, both in the spring and in the fall. Seminars focus on certain specific areas of law, and regional meetings. As part of that offering as well, of course, is the online offering, and that includes webinars like these ones. We are 4,000 members, active members from around 100 countries in the world. Now, the AIJA network it's more than that, because AIJA has been an association with an age limit, 45. The only thing that it means is that with the network that you create within AIJA expands all the way through life. So really, the network goes all the way through around 100,000 lawyers across the world. Now, AIJA as well, the way we do it is through combining two key elements, which are learning and networking. And we do that by the offering in our events and initiatives of top-notch academic content, combined with very high-quality networking, that allows people to get to know each other and continue and build friendships and a business relationship down the road. So in that regard, one of the AIJA as well is an association that it's a values-driven association. And one of its more important values is that of diversity, inclusion, and empowerment. And this session is primarily an example of that, and the AIJA Women Network. So our composition of the association is around 48% of the members are women of the association, and really half and half of the leadership of the association positions are assumed by women as well. So it's a really forward-looking association in this regard. So one of the things I want to say is that to bring to your attention some of the events, big events that our association is organizing, and where the AIJA Women Network will have a role on them. Or if you can go to the next one, please. Next slide. Thank you. So, and the big one, of course, is the annual Congress that's happening next year in Madrid from September 3rd to September 7th of 2024. You can expect around 800 to 1,000 lawyers from everywhere in the world attending that event, and we will have a very strong session participation from the AIJA Women Network there as well. Next, Oreste. Thank you. And in that regard, we have what I was mentioning, the November Javier conference, the fall spring meeting, and the fall meeting and the spring meeting thereafter in May next year. I think place one in Paris in this November 29th to December 2nd. The topic is on resiliency and sports. It's a dual track. And next year in Mexico, the Javier conference, it's also a dual track event on the digital economy and artificial intelligence, among other very important topics. Next. So I just want to close my very brief intervention, thanking, of course, our sponsors who made all this possible. Our annual sponsors are Barbary and Foresight, so we thank them very much for their support and partnership. And next, first, I think that's it for me. Thank you very much, and looking forward to learn a lot in this session and support all the initiatives of the AIJA Women Network during this year and the years to come. Thank you very much. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eduardo. So let's get started with the topic of today's webinar, striving for equity, understanding ownership inequalities, and growing your financial independence. This topic came about as I myself was reviewing my own financial planning, or I was rather reviewing my approach to my financial planning, realizing that I had focused on saving rather than making my income or my savings grow and work for me. And I read somewhere that girls are taught to save, boys are taught to invest. And though that might be a simplification, I do think there's some truth to it, or has been at least. And looking around my female network, I noticed that I was not alone. We rarely talked about money, and even more rare was that we would talk about investments. And despite the progress that has been taking place in gender equality over the last couple of decades, even though we think it's moving too slow, we know that women still own significantly less of society's assets, both private and corporate assets. Women are less likely to make investments that grow wealth. We are less likely to negotiate salaries and attain financial independence, or perhaps even more importantly, financial autonomy. Yet we know that with money comes power over our own lives. And you may have heard the term fuck off money, but it's also power that could gain us a seat at the table, the famous seat at the table, or perhaps more importantly, give us the possibility to decide the seating ourselves. And when we talk about striving for equality in our profession and in our private life, we have talked a lot about the wage gap, but I do not think we talk perhaps to a high enough degree about the ownership gap and the impact the ownership gap has on us as private people and on the society. We in the legal profession perhaps address this more often when we talk about partnerships in our firms or when we advise our clients. But in order to reach real equality on a societal level, as well as on the private level, I think we need to take a broader approach and we need to get going. And like most things, that starts with knowledge. So in order to provide us with some knowledge and help us contribute to accelerating female ownership, we have invited two speakers to join us for this webinar, Emma Heikensten and Michaela Berglund. Emma is a doctor in economics and has researched issues related to economic inequality and behavioral economics. Her research includes topics such as how to increase savings. Today, Emma works as a senior sustainability specialist at SEB Investment Management, with topics relating to everything from how we can invest more in gender equal and inclusive companies, as well as how to limit negative impact on biodiversity. She's also one of the early forces behind SEB's initiative for equal opportunities, with a focus on women's ownership and finances. And since 2018, she has been involved with the think tank Ownership, focused on increasing women's ownership within a range of different asset types within our lifetime. Our second speaker, Michaela Berglund, started her career in communication and business development and has held leading positions within tech and content marketing companies. In 2018, she became the CEO of Feminvest, which is Sweden's largest hub for female entrepreneurs and investors with nearly 47,000 members. The focus of Feminvest is to inspire and educate women to dare to own more, both as investors and as entrepreneurs. And the network consists of women of all ages with a common denominator that they to see their ownership grow in different ways. Michaela is also an active member of a number of company boards, as well as a television presenter for the financial channel, Ekonomikanalen, with a focus on financial news, and she's a podcaster. And I wish to give a warm welcome to both of our speakers. We are very happy to have you join us today. And we had the introduction here was took a little bit longer than expected, but Emma, please go ahead and take your time for your presentation. So I'm going to hand over to Emma directly.
Thank you. I will share my screen. I hope you see it now. I hope it's full screen. If not, please tell me. So I'm going to speak to you about financial equality. And as Maria introduced me, I sort of have three hats. One is a proper doctoral hat, while the others are then my daytime work. And the third one is, since the start of the think tank Ownership work in 2018, my spare time work, basically. And I got the question, or like when I spoke to Maria the other week, she asked me, I should sort of lay out the groundwork, like what's the status, what is the picture of the inequalities that we have in terms of gender today. And as she also mentioned, this is a number that we often have spoken about, and that we have spoken about perhaps since the 70s and the 80s. Still, we have an unadjusted wage gap in many parts of the world. This is UK, US, Germany, Estonia, and Latvia. That was about 20% in 2018. In Finland, Denmark, and Lithuania, this number was closer to 15%. In Sweden, it is about 10%. But this only tells us about, wage flows. It tells us nothing about capital. It tells us nothing about wealth, and it tells us nothing about financial autonomy, basically. In 2018, we were a group of women with different backgrounds. One lawyer, one investor, me as a PhD in economics, and a few people within marketing and communication who started this think tank. We decided that we wanted to accelerate the movement to increase women's autonomy through the increase of ownership, where we have seen that, without the fuck-off capital, without the wealth, it's hard to choose your life. It's hard to really choose your next step ahead. It's hard to leave a bad relationship whether that is one within your own sort of four walls, or whether it's the relationship that you have at work. Our approach is very research heavy. We have done 5 unique reports on ownership in Sweden. We have a broad network of professors and people as myself with doctoral degrees who are sort of gatekeepers on what type of facts goes into these reports and what type of research we actually then in the next step decide to communicate. And since the beginning of our launch, we have reached quite a broad public and are today a speaking partner to many different parts of the Swedish government, where they discuss our reports and our findings in order to sort of look through what they can do from a public perspective with regards to these issues. These are the 5 reports. I apologize that the titles are in Swedish. There are also, at least for the first 4, I know that there are English versions of them. The first one is called Who Owns Sweden? The second, why does women and men do not own the same amount yet? Who owns Swedish land? And then we have ownership in for better or worse, like in the sort of the marriage sense. And the latest one is who owns Swedish companies. In the first report, we found that men own twice as much as women within a range of different asset classes. I thought it was extremely interesting producing this report because I had not seen that many people who had taken this a holistic view of ownership. We went through public stocks and bonds. We looked at private savings. We looked at private companies, at pensions, at sort of large, rather investable commodities and consumption. We looked at land, forest, houses, but also music rights and patents. And in almost all of these different areas, if I would round, because we couldn't really sum them up because we don't have that type of wealth statistics in Sweden, or actually anywhere in the world. But what was interesting is that each and every one, when I rounded them up, men own, about 100% more than women, or women own about 50% of what men owns. So depending on how you choose to look at the statistics, those were the facts. When we looked at Swedish land, we took a bunch of different perspectives. These maps show Sweden. They show every single municipality. There are 292. If there are basically, or there are no green municipalities on the left side. That's based on like square meters, like the space owned, and we can see that in all of these municipalities, men or the darkest red is actually showing where men own more than 100% more than women. And if you look at the other map, you still see basically no municipalities where ownership is equal, and this is in terms of then taxated value of real estate. The report focused on marriage and even more so perhaps on divorce. We saw that gender differences increased after a divorce with about 350% looking at real estate value. We focus on real estate value since it is the easiest and best monitored wealth statistics that we have. So we can see that the group that enters marriage, they actually have a decrease in gender, in the gender gap from 33 to 22%. While then in the divorce group, we see that men goes from owning 17 to 75% more than women, and that corresponds to a 350% increase. Looking at companies, we found that there are more than twice as many women. There are more than twice as many men than women that owns companies. But at the same time, we see that the group is increasing both in the absolute numbers, but also in terms of the share of women. What I was sort of positively surprised about when we wrote this report is that the increase of women, it's going very slow, but it's still happening across sectors. So we see that, for example, pretty male-dominated sectors like energy, water, and electricity, rental and real estate services, production, extraction, and similar. We see an increase of women owners. And it's actually only one sector where we saw a decrease, and that is a sector that has been dominated by women for a very long time, which is culture and entertainment. So why is this? We, from an academic perspective, we boiled it down to three main reasons, starting with the man as the norms, which is about our history. It's about where we come from, what we have seen, and sort of the laws that have hindered us in the past. And this is a picture of women's right to vote, basically. And of course, this is also a part of it, having the power to, being a part of society in a political way, which also, of course, large impact on ownership structure and power structure, not the least. We can see here that it's been 100 years and somewhat more in many countries, but actually in Switzerland, which as you know is a very wealthy country, this didn't happen until much later. And there's actually also been laws that prevent women from opening bank accounts that actually did not change, for example, in the US until Ruth Bader Ginsburg went through with the I don't remember the name of the law, maybe one of you do, but these are actually sort of big things that did not happen too long ago, that has obviously limited women quite directly, but also indirectly, by providing or by enforcing norms around who should own a bank account and similar. When it comes to many small streams, I'm actually going to show a movie that I did in my role here or in my previous role here at SEB, showing the many small streams.
Hi, Paula. Statistically, you'll end up owning half of what a boy would. Wonder why? At home, you'll be left out of financial decisions. At work, you'll get less credit, advance slower, and get paid 10% less. If you have kids, you're 3 times more likely to work part-time, adding to a 30% gap in retirement income. You're also less likely to own your own home. Those are the statistics. But they don't have to be. Ownership means freedom, the freedom to shape your own life. That's why we want more women to thrive, lead, and invest. So let's change the statistics.
So the many small streams is about all of those decisions and all about the decisions that sort of reduces the inflows of money, and that can be a decision not to invest. It could be a decision to spend more time with your kids. It can be a decision to own less during a period of time. And I mean, none of these decisions is necessarily bad ones, but they do impact ownership structures. The last part we call catch 22, and I think that this is a very important one to think about, because we often hear that gender differences in savings, for example, are due to a risk aversion. While we can see that there are some gender differences in risk aversions in some studies, we also see that there are many studies where the differences are insignificant, both from a statistical point of view, but also from a size point of view, right? I mean, we have distributions of risk preference, right? And they are overlapping to a very high degree. The other part of this is the fact that social backlash still makes it difficult for women to sort of take a more prominent role in a company, perhaps, or to negotiate harder, because at that point you are going against the stereotype, which makes it we can make the sort of the person sitting in front of you react negatively, either implicitly or explicitly, but then that actually put you in a worse situation than you perhaps would have otherwise. It's basically a negative spiral. All of these different topics are interacting. The norm enforces the streams, right? Due to norms, you might choose an occupation that is female rather than male stereotyped, right? And in that occupation, you earn less. And then you hear that you should go up and negotiate. You do that, and you get a social backlash. So we have this sort of spirals to consider, and it's all starting with sort of this patriarchal social structure that affects everyone's upbringing, and that we are all used to, and that's also influencing our notions. And for myself, working sort of in finance and quite tech related or data driven, I mean, this is what I see all the time. I say men on all the signs, and I say men in most of the different rooms. On the other hand, I mean, if you go to HR, you have perhaps a more female stereotyped environment. We have the image of an entrepreneur, the image of a rich person, the image of a boss. And then you have the image of you, or others have the image of you. On the other hand, you have your self-confidence, what others view of you. You have the other people's expectations on you, and the behavior that they have towards you. And then you have your own behavior, right? So how are you supposed to influence this? I mean, of course, you can start with the self-confidence and your own behavior. But as I said, even though you change those to the extent that sort of necessary or feels reasonable, there is a risk of social backlash. It might not be, or if, of course, it's not a risk that has 100% fallout rate, but it's still a risk. So what to do? Well, start with yourself, of course. Start with the image that you have of others, the expectations that you have, and the behavior that you spread and consider. And then, as one person does this, we can break norms, and we can do active choices, and we can sort of climb this mountain where we change one person at a time. And I think that, of course, we need to set the legal system straight. And although we in Sweden are perhaps or were perhaps very much on the forefront when we introduced our discrimination laws in the 70s, there are still gaps in our legal system that perhaps have the view of men and women being equal, and thus set a playing field from that starting point, when that's not this actual starting point. For every single person, we can monitor our household work, make sure that we take equal parental leave, care for sick kids, as well as we care for our own private economy, care for asset allocations, care for investments, care for who actually owns the apartment or the house or the boat, for that matter. Invest more, and I'm sure that Michaela will talk more about that, but also make sure to be role models in terms of breaking norms and in terms of talking about your own investments, doing bad investments, doing good investments. At your work, make sure to increase transparency about wage transparency and process transparency and similar. There are many research articles speaking to that in terms of creating networks that are actually open for all, and not only by saying they're open for all, but also showing it. Maybe playing soccer is not the best activity to do after work, but rather making sure that you do things that actually attract all types of employees. And then we can always educate ourselves and others, our children or friends' children, in household economics. And this is also something that we can lobby for the politicians to care for to a larger extent than they do today. We need to create environments where we have the possibilities of being norm breakers, all of us, and set requirements and strategies for your own investments, but also push towards the funds that you own. I mean, I myself work as a ESG specialist at a fund company. I mean, we are interested to hear what our customers think, and if they don't say anything, how should we know that the stuff that we actually do is the stuff that they want us to, in terms of creating funds with more women on the boards or whatever it might be. It's often the people that screams the loudest that you hear most often. And in my world and among the customers, the big customers that we have, those are often men who actually sometimes ask the question on why we are creating products such as the SEB Global Equal Opportunity Fund, focusing on financial equality. And that was all for me.
Thank you, Emma. I was curious. Now we've talked about it from a Swedish perspective, but I would assume the numbers and the field basically looks the same all over the globe, at least to some extent. But
I mean, I could elaborate a little bit on that. I think that an issue that we have in terms of wealth is that it's very hard to monitor because many people don't want this data to be transparent, for example, and it's a very political issue in Sweden as well, but in the places where analysis have been done, it looks, at least in the Western world, sort of, it looks similar to the picture that we show for Sweden.
Do you see that there are any specific, well, even if you're talking about on a general level, but policy recommendations or interventions that your research suggests would help reduce gender disparities in asset ownership? Well, you mentioned the number, which is quite incredible, that the wealth for men increased by 350% after a divorce. I mean, that's an insane number.
And especially as I married, and I went into the marriage thinking that, okay, so if we split up at some point in time, I will get half. And clearly that's not what's going on. And these numbers can't be explained by the contracts that you write, prenups. Because we don't have that many prenups in Sweden. Although we might have more than in other places, that's not at all where we're at. So no, I mean, in terms of this, in terms of marriage laws, I actually think that there are things that we are lobbying and talking to Swedish politicians about currently that that concerns, for example, the time frame on how long time you can spend sort of in the process before you get to. Okay, so now I'm missing
assets, maybe.
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly. I mean, you have the first period before you actually get to the court, right? So you have this period where you discuss with one party, and that period could go on for sort of 10 years or even. There's no like deadline on this process, and if you're the one owning the assets, or if you're the one not owning the assets, it's very hard to sort of get funding for that period up that comes like with loans or anything, since you don't own anything. So that creates a very unequal playing field.
Oh.
And of course, there are countries in the world where still, women aren't allowed to own land or similar. And then you have an even longer distance to go, because you need to take away the formal barriers, and then you can start working with the more informal ones.
Thank you. I think we had Rosie, I'm gonna call you out. You had some news to share.
Hey Mia.
Hi.
I just put a little thing in the chat because it came out recently, I think on LinkedIn, and I just thought it's a really good news story, which we don't often get, about how lots of women are kind of reached the conclusion that it's so difficult to get promoted within the traditional law firm model. They're kind of doing it themselves and finding a lot of success founding their own firms, or like me, working within a slightly different law firm model where it's a bit more, you know, you have to prove yourself, but it's entirely sink or swim on your own merits rather than waiting for some older generation to bow down and give you the keys. So I didn't want to interrupt, but I just thought interesting to have some positive news or a positive spin as well.
No, and I must say, I mean, we are like all during these 5 years, we are moving in the right direction. And this is not something that we expect to change quickly, because, you know, we're looking at the stock of wealth, and that's not supposed to change year to year. But we are seeing some positive trends, and I think that, you know, looking at Sweden in particular, we have quite a few large family-owned companies that own, you know, some, you know, maybe even more than half of the Swedish Nasdaq stock market. However, we see daughters there, and we see daughters that actually are looking to take over and similar. And I think that those role models are super important in order to sort of spread the ownership of companies, at least.
I think that's really a very interesting point. I read somewhere recently about the huge wealth transfer from the baby boomers that's going to take place in the coming years and decades, and the impact that may have. Have you observed any shifts in asset ownership patterns between genders, depending on or based on this generational shift that is happening? Is there something that you can see, a trend that it is becoming, also because of that wealth transfer, also that gender disparities are decreasing? Is it something that you can see, or is it not there yet?
During recent, I mean, I think that these are mostly, rather than actual trends, I think that we have seen a few. I mean, these are you know, there's not so many people that we're talking about in terms of this sort of huge or these very, very wealthy families. So it's more about, you know, like, it's not statistical in any way, but it's rather the fact that a few people have, a few women have inherited recently, and being around these people, it seems like there will be more coming.
Okay,
but nothing is for sure, for course.
We have a comment from Monica. You wanna share it? I just trying to comment in the chat. What to say? More men get more in case of divorce than women, instead of getting 50%, because, for example, they hide their assets. Could you give some reasons for this uniquely high split of assets? What is the reasons behind that split?
I mean, I would say that hiding asset could be an issue as well. I mean, if you're the one who, you know, have the family bank account, have the, you know, if your name is on everything that you own basically together, of course it's then up to the other person who doesn't have the assets to prove that person that owns the asset, to prove the you know, the value of those assets, right? Hence, this is a potential issue. I mean, we don't have the numbers on that, but we have spoken to many women who do believe that their former husbands are hiding assets. So I would think that this is definitely potentially an issue.
Okay. Thank you. I think we need to hand over to Michaela and shift over to a very practical approach to making our money grow. So I'm going to hand over to you, Michaela. Thank you, Emma, for now.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. And this will be a very practical session from many aspects, as I have got my 9 months baby next to me this afternoon. So if I'm interrupted, he's very much a man, even though he's 9 months, and he's loud and noisy. So for you to know. So I'll share a presentation here, and thank you, Emma, for this amazing introduction. I've been obviously following your work over the years, and I'm so impressed by especially your work in conducting research and ensuring that it's understandable and available. And I really admire that. Let me see. So Feminvest is an organization. We are based and raised in the Swedish soil, but are now tapping into other countries. So we've just expanded to Norway and in Finland. We see a lot of synergies, and we build the market and a service and a community for a global audience, but we take one country at a time. And we accelerate female ownership. And by the foundation that Emma is providing on what it looks like, it's quite easy to understand why we do what we do. And my name is Michaela, and I realized a few years back that because I was given the brand Feminvest, and I realized that I had to create my own destiny, and showing women that I could not only encourage them to take financial risk, but I had to take the steps myself. So I was owning half of the company. I was a majority owner when I started negotiating with a company to buy it from a publicly listed company. And by the spring last year, we finally came to an agreement and signed a deal, and I bought the company. And when I bought it, I thought, now I can grow. Now it's fully owned by women. I am one of the owners, and then I also brought in a few other women from a strategic point of view and from an operational point of view. So, for example, my first employee, and now I take on shareholders. So my employees are becoming shareholders this autumn. And I think it's a really important factor when you work with the question that I do. I have to offer it to the team. So women is now the larger part of our community. We do get contact. Hey, Phila. We do get contacts from men as well that wants to be a part of what we do and support what we do in different ways. We are 50,000 women across Sweden, and are now have almost 1,000 women in Norway, and going into Finland as well. I think one of the reasons that we've been growing rapidly and successfully is that I don't have a finance background. I've got a communications background, and that in combination with my financial knowledge has given me other perspectives than what traditional finance has historically, worked with. Today we work in 3 different ways, and in Sweden, as you know now, with raising interest rates, that we have quite a high exposure towards real estate by owning our own accommodations. And I see that apart from that, there are 3 very concrete ways where we can become millionaires. And it's the same behavior that is holding us back from tapping into those opportunities, financial opportunities. And it's investing in the stock market, investing in a great company, investing in an unlisted company, that would be, and start your own business. So we are building an ecosystem based on those 3 areas where we unite women. And it's quite fun to have this conversation today, because yesterday was a perfect occasion where it showcased how spot on we are in what happens when we bring those 3 segments together. Because women that have been investing in the stock market, similar to myself, I took the money that I had invested in the stock market, and some of it, and sold it and bought Feminvest. And they would explore investing in unlisted companies when they have, are comfortable and want to explore diversifying their portfolio. And some of the entrepreneurs tap into investing on the side. So I see a lot of synergies in that regard, and there are some initiatives globally focusing on specific areas, but not building the community as we do. We got 3 different subscription models, like memberships. One second, I'm just gonna give it. So we've got subscriptions fee. We also take success fee when we raise funds for female entrepreneurs, and we've been raising about funds for 17 female majority-owned companies, as that would be criteria. And we also offer other services around this. So, for example, we are the main partner for Visa and coaching scale-up companies in their new grant that they've been having for a couple of years in Sweden and Norway. The first thing I did when I bought the company, it was like, if I know I want to grow, even though I was the sole owner, I need to get women and men in positions to actually start build on the vision I have long term. So I decided to bring in a few people that had followed my first years working with Feminvest into the advisory and the board. And I asked 6 women to become shareholders in the company, and everyone said yes, which I think is quite incredible, actually. One of the reasons that I started the investor network that is investing in other companies is because I met an investment bank, and the CEO of an investment bank that is global and really successful. And I said, I'm considering building a female angel investor network. And he started to laugh at me. This was during the pandemic, so we did it digitally. And his PA had set up the meeting, and he said, Michaela, there are no female angel investors. And by that, I started a network. I decided to not argue with him. I felt like with his position, he's got his data points. So rather than focusing on his perspectives, I'll just show by doing. And I think that's kind of what we do consequently in this organization. Yes, last night we launched a new initiative, and it's beautiful that Emma is here, because ownership is actually a part of this initiative. So we launched the first global run for women's ownership. And this is a part of raising awareness on the work that we do, but also what I said yesterday is that we as women feel so alone when it comes to our insecurities around making financial investment. And that race and that work has to be done on a personal level. But a race shows when we show up together, shows that we are in this together and that we are not alone. So we have quite an amazing response to this, and so many people we haven't even emailed attendees from the event yesterday about this yet, but we've had quite a few, partners that wants to run companies, and also women and men that have booked tickets to run on the 4th of May 2024. So I would say if it's any season that's amazing to come to Sweden, it's May, June. So if you aim to come visit, 4th of May 2024 is not a bad date. And you can learn more about that on our website. The natural next step for us, as building a community, exploring the untapped potential of female entrepreneurs, educating women on investing in unlisted companies, financial modeling, even the knowledge of sweat equity and how you can leverage your knowledge to actually get access to ownership. It's natural for us to pursuing building assets ourselves. So I've been funding a company called Feminvest Ventures, and we'll only invest in female majority-owned companies. There's one survey, there's so little money going towards women, so hence it's so little data on KPIs on the revenue of female-owned companies. But what we can see, and this survey is quite often quoted in different webinars and events, is there's Boston Consulting Group data points from North America and from 2018, and this says so much about how much work can be done in this area. But it showed that the female-founded startups gave twice the revenue in comparison to the male founded startups. And we are convinced that that's the case. So our pitch is that investing in women, it's a numbers game, because it's so interesting when you start talking about investing in women, people go, oh, are you going to have enough like numbers in terms of how many companies are funded by women? What's the deal flow? But if you would go to any other vertical like clean tech, or if you would go to food tech, no one is asking that question. So it just shows that we need KPIs, and that's one of the things that we want to do. So I'm preparing for our next venture that will be launched in the beginning of 2024, and that I'm super excited about. So make sure to follow Feminvest on our social channels to see what that is. But our goal is to show that women are worth investing in, and it's good revenue, good returns. We have done a first investment from Feminvest Ventures, and I regard that investment slightly different from the others, because it's a company where we see that they are extending the work that we do. So it's a quality insurance. So you get when you go on maternity leave, or when you get a kid, or paternity leave for that matter, the person that is staying at home get a compensation for the loss of pension from the person that is working. And the company is called Charlie Equity, and I think they do it in a really innovative way. It's a very early market, and they are up. It's like David against Goliath, I would say, but I wanted to support their matter. So it's more of a personal investment from me rather than the portfolio that we are building. So there are some other really clear data, though, in terms of equality and how companies are performing. And we see naturally that with women-led businesses, equality is a part of the business plan. So that's something that we want to get KPIs on. For example, all the companies in our entrepreneurs network, we do evaluation of them once a year. So we started a network in the spring, and now we're conducting the first valuation of the companies, and then we'll do another next year on the same company. So we can track that how much value has grown in those businesses in a year. And then we do that year on year. So it's one of the impact metrics of ours. And I believe that this is just the beginning. You know, the one thing that women have always created is impact and meaning. The problem that we haven't, or the issue that it's time for us to tackle now is to actually integrate that with building wealth. Because with that, equality will come too. Thank you so much. And I hope you hear me well, despite the little one.
Yeah, thank you, Michaela. We have a question, and I think that's it's a good one. You know, getting started, we're talking about making investments in companies that are not non-listed companies and so on. But I think a key issue for many is, where do you start? Like, how do you actually, you know, with what kind of money do you start to make these investments? And the question here is from Monica: where can we get the money to invest? From accumulated monthly wages? Like, at what level are we talking about? Because going in and starting to invest in non-listed companies feels like quite a high step to take. I don't know how if you want to share something from your personal development into investing and angel investments, or how did you get started?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I see it from a few different angles. If you know that you want to be part of it, if I didn't know that I wanted to invest in unlisted companies, I started with my monthly savings in the stock market. But by time, after 10 years, I had some money that I could use. And so if one has set goals, it's not going to happen fast. If it's money that you want to grow, we have to be patient. And I think we kind of lost track on that we need time during the pandemic, because everything happened so fast. And now it's been happening fast the other way around, going down again. So financial markets will be stabilizing over the next years. So patience, but we should never underestimate that monthly saving of ours. So that's the first step. Secondly, it doesn't take that much money. And we offer initiatives to actually co-invest, for example. So we have more than often women coming together. The smallest ticket that we have in our network is 100,000 Swedish krona, which is 10,000 euro. So, or even less than that now, with the euro being so strong. So it doesn't take a lot of money if you find the right context. And there are a few other, things that you need to consider, is like deal flow, like who's on the cap table. So like, if you don't have a lot of money, can you ensure that you invest in a company where there are strong owners? So you get to be a part of a growth journey where they can continue to invest. Like it becomes more important to get a community around you, whether it's investors that can do the due diligence or together with you, or if it's providing funding. Furthermore, I would say explore sweat equity. We are giving so much of our knowledge and time, and it's especially, I think this audience you're good at putting together an agreement, between parties to actually concretely put into words like what you can get, rather than just sending an invoice. Actually getting ownership if you really believe in that company or you see good traction. So that's also highly underestimated, and we should explore that further.
I think the one thing we can say is that by not getting engaged and getting involved, we are losing out massively. We are losing out on a private level, but we are also losing out on wealth on a societal level if we can't get the female-founded companies to grow, if we can't help them to get the investments they need to grow and accelerate, and doing the same for our own income and our own savings, we are losing out. I think it's
I think it's yeah, you are absolutely right, and we are according to data, historic data, you know, there are some data that shows that we are not taking the same risk, and there are some surveys that show that we take the same level of risk. But I mean, if we own half, of course we are not. I think it's natural to not take the same risk. You know, the more you own, the more risk you take, because the more comfortable you get around making decisions, and you don't have that much to lose. So there are so many components that's important, and Emma is more an expert in this regard, but you are absolutely right. It's like pushing button. If you know that this is something you want to explore, it's like look up communities, take steps, make promises to yourself, set up savings account, make progress, and celebrate every step that you take.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think even before that, there's so many small steps we can take in our lives, in both in our roles as legal advisors to help be a force to sort of push for a change and accelerate the change, and help our clients to make those decisions.
There are certain limitations for you, though, I can imagine, in terms of like what you can own, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But as advisors, we can help push from a different angle. Ownership is a different matter in this. You're absolutely right. There are limitations to what we can what we can do in that regard. But in our private life, it's just to get started, right? It's just to be aware of where the pitfalls are, and to be careful and mindful of the income that we actually have and what we do with it and how we place it. To help ourselves to reach financial autonomy, basically. I think would be the conclusion. Do we have any further questions to our speakers for today? No questions? Okay. Thank you so much, Emma and Michaela, for participating today. And I'm just gonna close this off. And thank you to all of you who attended the webinar. The next AIJA event, like AIJA Women's Network event, is, as Eduardo said, it's going to be in Paris for the half-year conference, where we'll be talking about resilience in a joint session with the Skill Commission.